Hello and welcome back. It's now time for the simracing.gp podcast powered by Moser Racing. If you've not been following the racing today, my name is Paul Glover. I'm joined by Alex Goldschmidt and also our guest this week from Genisus Esports is Gareth Hawkins. Gareth, welcome to the podcast.
Good evening. Thanks, everyone. It's great to be here.
Good to have you. And whilst we've got the Motor Endurance Championship going on behind us, we might as well touch on that. How do you feel like the race is going for your teams so far?
Well, I suppose it's been an interesting one, that's for sure. Tariq and the lads obviously doing what they do best and staying out front. And the academy guys obviously getting some good practice in. Trying to avoid cars and sometimes not too successful, but otherwise it's going pretty well. Pretty chuffed that they're still within the top 5. So they must just keep at it. There's still another 3 hours to go, so plenty time to catch up and do what they need to do.
Yeah. So Gareth, let's start off with what's your role at Genisus Esports and how did you get involved?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story, actually. This actually all started off with starting off a cybersecurity business, which is Genisus Risk. So what we decided to do is, instead of reaching out to a third party and outsource the marketing aspect of what we need to do, we decided to try and do a different type of initiative and leverage the esports world. There's actually 2 factors to that. So the first initiative we did was actually Genesis Sim to Real, which was a simulated series over an 8-week or an 8-race period. The winner of that then got a seat in a real car for a season, which was 7 races over the duration of this year. And the winner of that series was Tariq Adam. And that's when we got to know each other a bit better and started discussing, how do we take this further? How do we really leverage, the esports world and create something special and give guys the opportunity to come in and develop their skills. And that's kind of how the Genisus Esports team was born. So it was Tariq, Luke, and Cody, which is the core team. And then post that, we looked at starting to develop some academy teams so that the guys can go through the ranks and kind of progress with some of the top drivers in the world. I mean, over the course of the year, the drivers also competed in SRO, the Mobileye SRO Championships, or something along those lines. But so they actually competed in all of the different regions. So Cody competed in SRO Americas, where he landed up winning the silver division, because being the first year, all of them were in silver, not in pro.
Mm-hmm.
So Cody won silver for Americas, and then Luke and Tariq entered in Asia. So they were a little bit too late to get into the EMEA grid, but the intention is, of course, to get spread across all of the regions next year. And that's, of course, where the academy guys come into play, because we'd ideally like to have all of the drivers at the highest level. And so far, it's worked out quite well. And having tournaments like these and championships, I mean, really helps the team develop, driving against some of the best in not just the region, but across the world. And, and everything. And I heard you mentioning earlier about the Kaizen Championship. And Kaizen is actually a Japanese principle of continuous improvement. So that's the whole principle, is to just come in and continue to improve, whether it be 1% every day, it's still an improvement, right? So, and this is where we are. And now the guys are on track doing their thing.
So you mentioned esports, and when we think about esports, we don't just necessarily think sim racing, but is it just sim racing that you focus on in general, or do you have other esports teams that are out there as well as part of the team?
Well, the intention is to grow into the other areas, to do first-person shooter, the likes of Counter-Strike, strategy. So ideally, we'd like to have various disciplines, so the racing, strategy, and first-person shooter, whether that strategy be Dota or whatever the case is. But there was a big focus this year on getting the racing up and going, get established, get a a framework that we can then obviously expand on. And well, the racing's been keeping us busy, so we just haven't had the time to expand that. And I mean, the successes that we've had in the racing, it's this is why we've kind of remained focused on just maturing this as much as possible.
So what year did you start? Was it pre or after COVID?
Well, that's actually interesting. I mean, I knew absolutely nothing about racing prior to sim racing, and it happened during COVID. In fact, it was the kids had what was it, Gran Turismo on the PlayStation, and then I went and got a virtual VR headset. And I tried that, and I thought this is just useless. VR headset with a controller. We need to get a wheel. So we got a wheel, and a friend of mine said, "No, but I really need to try Assetto Corsa." So I did, and the wheel just never went back to the PlayStation, and that's kind of how I started sim racing. Enjoyed it thoroughly, but nowhere close to where these guys are. I mean, the amount of time that you need to put into it, because that's what it's about, right? It's seat time. You need to put the effort in, put the practice in. But I enjoy an enduro now and again. I thoroughly enjoy it. But yeah, so it's been fun, and it's pretty much been since the COVID era or period.
Yeah. So would you agree that since COVID that sim racing has kind of been on an upward trajectory? I think a lot of people expected it to dip afterwards when real life motorsport, shall we say, kind of got back to the normality. But I believe it's continued to keep that momentum.
No, absolutely, and I think it's actually contributed more to real life motorsport than anyone could have anticipated. I suppose there's lots of talk around the difference between Verstappen's driving and Hamilton's driving, and the former sits in a rig more often than not. And I think just that kind of exposure and the renewed interest in real life motorsport, I think, has contributed towards the sim racing, kind of explosion. I mean, like I said, I wasn't too involved with real racing prior to this, but during the journey of doing the sim to real, we obviously built some relationships with some racing teams and racing management kind of agencies. And here in South Africa, we've definitely seen an uptake from the manufacturers. So whether it be Toyota, BMW, VW, they all now kind of trying to bring the two worlds together as to how do we bring the sim racing aspect into the real world. And the whole point is, I mean, it's a lot easier to go out and smash a virtual car and hit the reset button and go back to pits than trying to practice your craft in a real car. I mean, that costs a couple of bucks to go and repair. So,
yeah, more than a couple, I think. And but it's not even when you damage it, is it? It's getting your license, it's getting the the parts, the fuel, the scrutineering costs. I think that's where the virtual wins over real racing, right? Is that I can suddenly boot up Assetto Corsa Competizione and suddenly I'm in Suzuka from the comfort of my rig, right?
Absolutely, and in any supercar, GT3 car you can think of. So you can hop into a Porsche, you can hop into a Lambo, jump back to pits and decide, no, let me try the Ferrari out. And you'll never be able to get that kind of experience in real world. Well, definitely not at the same cost. I mean, there is obviously still differences between sitting in the simulator as opposed to a real car, and it's getting closer and closer with getting motion rigs and that type of thing. But I mean, you'll never get the full immersion. Well, I suppose I can never say never, right? But yeah, it's there's obviously still a gap between them. But I think and something that I've seen, even in real life, I mean, I once or twice in the wet, I've landed up catching my own car, and I think to myself, there's no ways I would have caught that car if I didn't have the sim racing experience. So it's amazing at how you can feel the movement of the car just through the steering wheel. So I think from that perspective, it kind of sharpens the driver's senses in the visual and just feeling the car through the wheel. And I mean, we saw the same with Tariq. I mean, during the real racing season that he did, The first race, so how it worked was it was actually a vehicle sponsored by Toyota. There were 12 cars on the grid. The 6 of them were the Yaris GRs, and the other 6 was the 86s. And so the GRs would also the Yarises would be in front of the grid, and off they would go. And then they would start the 86s at the back. And his first race day, the leader of the 86 pack landed up overtaking him before the end of the race. It was an 8-lap race or something along those lines. Whereas the second race day, he was at the back of the pack, but he didn't get overtaken by the 86. And by the third race day, he was fighting in the middle of the pack. And as the season progressed, so he just got better and better as he got a feel for a real car. But the reaction time that he had and some of the catches that he had in the real car is all attributed to the experience that he's gained in the sim world. So it's been interesting. It's been interesting.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that the lines are getting blurred between real and sim. I don't think we'll ever get to that point unless you could spend $50,000, $100,000, pounds, euros, whatever your currency is, because you could never really recreate what the feeling in the seat. But there is something to be said about learning to catch by feeling something through the wheel. Yeah, I think, and it's really good that he was able to make progression as the races went on. Have you had a go at any real life racing or anything, or had a go in the car while he was taking part? Have you?
Well, no, I didn't want to tease myself, to be honest. I knew if I had to get in the car, I'd really want to have a stab at it. So I think the initial thought process was, well, either I get in a car or we rather invest in this type of series or initiative where we create something that's sustainable and then we can continue season after season. At some point, I do want to get into a car. In fact, I'd love to do a 24-hour enduro, whether that be the Dubai 24-hour, which happens every January. But that's kind of the intention, is to also kind of afford the guys the opportunity to get into a real car and possibly one day the whole team get into a car together and do an enduro. How far that is off, who knows? It's like I said, we're just taking it one step at a time. And this is why we've been focusing on the racing, because there's just so much more to explore in this space that it's for us it's been an interesting journey and one that we're really keen on taking to the next level.
So for you personally, you touched on that you had Gran Turismo, you got a VR headset, and then you tried Assetto Corsa. Have you never been a sim racer up until more recently then? You never played like the Jeff Grammond games of the past? No?
Never. So a couple of the guys that's in the team, they've got a long-standing history in doing sim racing, to way back to some of the early sims. I think so. Formula One, F1, when it came out, still bashing away on the keyboard. I did a bit of that at a stage, but nowhere close to at a competitive level. I think it was just me and my mate, and I didn't like him having better times than me, so I'd put in some times, and so we would kind of try and beat each other. But outside of that, this is the first time we really gotten into sim racing, and the production quality and the telemetry that you can get out of the likes of Assetto Corsa is amazing. I mean, it's my son the one day walked in. I was actually watching a real GT3 race, and he said, "Oh, what race is your team racing in now?" I said, "No, dude, this is a real race." And he had to go up to the TV and go. Right. He couldn't tell the difference between a real race and the virtual. So yeah, no, I think it's a great time to get into it, and I'd believe if we see the Unreal 5 engine coming out, it's going to be even more difficult to try and distinguish between the two, and we're just seeing huge strides in technology. So whether that be on the hardware side or whether that be on the graphics side and the systems themselves, it's like you said, right? It will be difficult to completely replicate it, but man, we're getting close.
Yeah, we are definitely
getting close.
And then from Alex's point of view and my point of view, when it comes to commentary, we have live timing available to us. We know there is some information we don't get told, isn't there, Alex? Like in Assetto Corsa Competizione, we don't know how many track cuts a team has got and things like that. But we are able to tell you how long a pit stop's been for, and what the average lap time looks like, and so forth, and be able to kind of relay that information to the viewer. For your teams, this Moser Endurance Championship is in a set of Corsa Competizione. What other well, I was going to use the word games, but sims are you competing in? Are you doing them all across the board?
No, so at the moment it's purely ACC.
Okay.
I do believe that there was some rumors going around. I don't know what the final verdict would be as to whether SRO would possibly move to iRacing. But ultimately, that's where we're focusing. Is just the highest level of racing that is available. At the moment, that's probably sitting within the SRO space. So who knows in the future? But at the moment, it's purely ACC that we focus on.
And what about you personally? Is it all about Assetto Corsa 1? Is it Assetto Corsa Competizione, or have you got a favourite?
Well, definitely Competizione. I think Assetto Corsa is great. The mods that you can run in there. I've also tried a Formula One car on there once or twice, and damn, those things are difficult to try and keep on track. But yeah, so it's definitely Assetto Corsa Competizione all the way. And like I said, even the production quality as well is phenomenal. As opposed to others, they're definitely a step ahead there.
And what are your thoughts about the Nordschleife finally coming as well?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. The team's been talking about it, and they're quite keen. Luke was saying last night when he was having a bit of a break and doing a bit of a first-person shooter just to unwind a bit. We were chatting, and I think he mentioned something like he's done in excess of 3,000 laps on that track in other sims. But yeah, I'm quite keen. I mean, it's great to see new tracks come in. The fact that the tracks are laser scanned also is just, again, takes it to the next level. And I was reading one of the posts of someone that was actually testing the track out in some of the leaks that we've had now recently, where he was even mentioning a particular tree that has formed an umbrella kind of shape over a certain part of the track. So when it's wet, that part of the track is dry, and it's replicated in the sim, and that really makes a difference, right? So it gives the guys an opportunity to really get to know that track inside out, because it is down to the millimeter of detail.
So, I guess what a question for me, and I think I might know what the answer might be here, but what's your favourite track in ACC?
Sure. Okay. Well, it's Carl Army. It has to be.
Yeah, that's why I knew it. I knew
it. You cannot ask someone from South Africa that question and get any other answer.
Yeah, I know, but it is a great track, though, isn't it? Yeah,
it is. It is. And I think
that sausage curve on the second to last corner. That's the only.
The cheetah. Yeah, that's a problem. It really is. So it's it's definitely one of my favorites. Nürburgring is right up there. Spa I quite enjoy just because of the history of the track, and I mean it's I suppose the more difficult tracks, the more time you spend in it and the better you get at it, obviously the more you end up enjoying it. But the other one would be so it's Karl-Army, Nürburgring. Barcelona I struggle with. I think that's one of my tougher tracks.
What about Kota? What about Kota?
Oh, I've hardly done any sea time in Kota, I must admit. So life unfortunately got a little bit busy when that DLC came out. So I tend to avoid it. Let's put it that way. But yeah, it's there's some tracks that I just know I need to spend a hell of a lot more time in before I even think of jumping into an official race. I'll just do some single player. It's all good.
So that's always the best way there, Gareth. But question for me, of course, getting someone like the younger brother of current Ferrari Esports driver, Jordan Sherritt, Cody, on the squad at Genisus Esports was a bit of a masterstroke, and him being part of the core team. There's a lot of people that really do enjoy sim racing in South Africa, but then you also look at the talent in IRL, such as the famed Van der Linde brothers. Of course, Sheldon winning the DTM title last year. We've got the likes of Dave Perel, of course, for me being a bit of an F1 historian, Jody Scheckter winning the 1979 F1 World Championship for Ferrari. How much is the popularity of sim racing going in South Africa? Is it really, really on a rise, and is it really, really sort of getting people involved, especially with you guys at Genisus not only having one car in this championship, but today we've got three because we've got the likes of Christian Deploy and Christian Venter and everybody else. How's it all going over there in South Africa with regards to the rise of sim racing? It must be on an uphill curve, I'm sure.
No, absolutely. And barring you giving your age away there a bit, but just getting back to Jordan. So it's actually funny how it worked out, because I was actually in discussions with Jordan first, beginning of last year, discussing this exact same kind of concept, and how do we do a development program and bring various drivers in. And when the Genesis Sim to Real tournament started, in fact, it was a couple of days before, it was him that let Tariq know that this thing is happening. And that's why Tariq jumped in, and then he ended up winning it. And so, yeah, it's actually quite interesting how that came full circle. But it's definitely on the rise, and we see it in all the communities. I mean, we've got a couple of communities within SA where there's continual, weekly races that happen, and various championships, and it's growing, and to the point where we've even got representation in terms of so the South African MSA, so the Motorsport Association, where there's a sim racing working group, which we're also involved with in some shape or form. So there's a keen interest. There's a lot of focus on it. There's an appetite to mature it, and also to take it to the next level, and to bring it closer to the real thing. So it's definitely on the rise. We're seeing even from the you'll see a lot of the manufacturers, the sim racing or the hardware manufacturers, such as Moser, really kind of stepping it up in SA, and contributing a lot towards these types of initiatives. So it's definitely not slowing down. It's accelerating, and we're just very happy to be a part of it, and be at the foundation of it. And this is why we thought, let's try and put the team together. Let's put some structure together, and let's really give the opportunity for individuals to join the fold, and take it to the international stage. Because, well, I won't talk about the cricket today. If anyone was watching, I ended up switching that off early. So,
No, my
but
dad. If you were having a chat with my dad, he'd probably wax lyrical about whatever was going on with the cricket. He normally does it with me, but I go, well, hang on, motorsport's my bag, so you better leave me alone.
yeah, well, I kind of gave up on cricket a long time ago, but my son's gotten quite heavy into it again. So yeah, I decided, well, seeing as that he's now really throwing everything at it, I'll also join the fold. But yeah, the cricket team, it seems like they're going for all the records in this World Cup, including the lowest score today. But yeah, no. So it's the sim racing. I mean, it's the interesting thing is, if you look at some of the stats, you've got all the new generation, or I don't know if that's the right word, but the generation that's coming into the workforce today. I think the stats were something ridiculous, like 60% of them prefer watching virtual sports than real sports. And we'll continue seeing that. Obviously, real sports will never lose its place, but virtual sports is really up there, in terms of competitiveness, in terms of broadcasting quality, in terms of global interest. So, the nice thing is, because of the fact that it's all connected in the cyber valley, if you like, or cyber village, you can quite easily hop in and race against someone in Germany, any time of the evening, or day, anyone across the globe, right? I mean, this is what really makes it special. You don't have to cart your cars all over the world. I mean, during the COVID period, again, during the GT World Challenge kind of series, when it came down to Kyalami, I think all the vehicles had arrived, I think, late November. Then we had another lockdown for various reasons. And here we go. Now all the teams are stuck with their vehicles in logistical nightmares. And it's obviously a difficult thing to try and manage. Where the virtual sport, it's okay. Well, let's just go, right? We'll reschedule for tomorrow. Everyone pop in, and off we go. So it's the flexibility is, I think, what also really adds to the value.
I mean, I wanted to actually come on to now the Kaizen methodology, obviously with regards to it being a Japanese term, and of course manufacturers like Toyota, who just picked up another FIA World Endurance Crown in Bahrain this past weekend. What was the impetus for deciding to bring a championship onto the roster for Genesis? Because of course you've got the Esports Club, which it's part of. Was it just sort of like saying, well, look, here we are, we're a competitive race team, we've raced in SRO Esports, and we want to be part of this ever-growing community, not just in South Africa, but globally?
No, absolutely, and I think it's also creating different clubs within a region. If we want to go and compete against any of the other teams or clubs within SA, we want to have a home ground where we can say, this is, if we want to invite teams, or if we want to challenge teams and go onto their platforms. There's some other clubs here within SA that's also moved on to SGP. And platforms like this just affords us the opportunity to have a platform where the team can run these types of championships in the way that they obviously want to. And we kind of figured, well, why not? We have the right number of drivers that are able to compete in it, and let's add a bit of a prize pool and see what kind of talent we can get in there. And we're quite humbled to have the likes of Boothby, Whitehead that actually joined the Kaizen Championship, and there's quite a couple of drivers from various countries, whether it be Sweden, Germany, the UK, and that's what I love about it, right? And that one we actually put together fairly quickly. It was in a space of about 2-3 weeks that we said, we're keen on doing it. And part of it was also to align with the LFM series. So this is why it is a 12-week series. So and it's Wednesday nights. LFM is on the Thursday night. So we figured, well, why not kind of follow the same tracks so that we prepare the guys for the Thursday night races. Because in the Thursday night, or the LFM Pro Series, the Case King Pro Series, you've got a lot of drivers that actually also compete in SRO. So it's so the whole point of the Kaizen is to let the guys improve and continue to improve in preparation for some of the much bigger events. And talking about that, we have load shedding. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced load shedding.
Yes. Well, yeah, I am aware of that.
That was an unexpected one.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I should be able to solve this because my lights just went off, but I'll do a bit of a hack.
I've heard about this. Yes.
Yeah, because funnily enough, I happen to know the broadcaster for the Kaizen Championship anyway. A fellow countryman of yours, Mr. Costello, and he has about 3 different 12-volt batteries in his room just to get around it. Because but for what, as you've now seen firsthand, folks, what load shedding in South Africa looks like when you're at home and you're on a podcast talk. So, but I think that's part and parcel of life over there in SA, Gareth. I would imagine this is part of what you guys go through on a daily basis.
Yeah, it is, and luckily I have got at least the key infrastructure like the router on backup power, so that's not too much of an issue. But clearly these lights aren't linked up to that. So and the schedule tends to change. You can never really keep up with when it's happening and not happening. They'll go from stage 1 to stage 2, 3, and off you go. But yeah, luckily I made sure that the key infrastructure, you can't go without internet. That's a problem.
No, what can you do about YouTube, hey, and Netflix, and everything else that we can get on the wonderful internet now? So, what I want to understand is a bit more about the structure. You talk about the drivers, but is there anything behind the scenes that we don't necessarily see? I mean, myself and Alex commentated on the Endurance Championship for the Sim Racing Expo last year, and they had on-site teams and with their cockpits, and some of the teams would have team managers with them, looking at the data and trying to find where they could gain an advantage on their competitors. Is that something that you have as part of the structure for your esports team?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and there's actually more to it than that. Just within the context of the group. So, as I mentioned, we actually have a cybersecurity business, Genesis Risk, and both Genesis Risk and the Genesis Esports team. It kind of forms part of the Genesis group. So, actually, the Genesis Esports team sits squarely within Genesis Extreme, and Genesis Extreme is our digital marketing kind of arm within the group. So there's a couple of role players in that. So and the guys that are on track at the moment. So for instance, Christian Deploy, he does our graphics. So he's our graphic designer. Giovanni Porzio, he's our video editor. Daniel Dematos Preto, he's coming in and looking at some of our digital marketing strategies, because that's his forte is digital marketing. Tariq is busy studying his information systems degree, so I'm kind of trying to hurry him up along so that he can get that done, because he'll be joining, the group as soon as he's done with that. Luke is coming into the fold, more into the Genesis Risk side in terms of the solutions and technologies that we provide to customers. So from that side, there's a whole lot of things happening on the back end, but within the team itself, I mean, Cody, he generally sits and does a lot of the analytics for us with various races and setups and all the rest of it. In fact, all of them you also do setups, right? So Luke he does training and his own setups. The guys also do setups for the likes of Coach Dave. They do setups for Go. So it's a whole mix and match of different initiatives or areas that the guys actually get involved in within sim racing. But yeah, from the analytics side, I mean, the guys are really good at understanding the dynamics of the car, the behavior of the car, and the various cars. Obviously, testing them and creating setups and providing coaching, and it's just expanding. And the guys are getting, just by spending time with each other, the guys within the academy team are obviously picking up on that knowledge, and they're able to also start sharing and contributing in some shape or form. I mean, even now recently, we're looking at some load cell pedals, and I kind of shipped them off to Christian Venter, who's also busy racing, and I mean, he was able to kind of give us a really good breakdown of the pros and cons and where the stuff can get tweaked. And so the guys contribute in all various areas towards everything that we're doing. And that's what keeps it exciting, right? So if your moonlighting job it drives, always, if you're passionate about it, then and contributes towards your day job, then at some point it's not actually work anymore. Then you just always living your passion.
Yeah, I get that degree. I work in IT myself, and this kind of, it's more of a passion than a job. So I get to do the day job, and then I come on here and Alex is a full-time commentator as well. I'm more of a part-time commentator / broadcaster, and it's nice to be able to turn that into something you enjoy doing, and the passion comes across. So, what happens after a race then, from an esports point of view? Do you always have a meeting following an event, whether it's gone well, whether it's gone bad? Do they dissect every little bit of detail and try and see where they could squeeze every millimetre of performance out of the car, and understand, okay, this worked well, but we could have done better here?
No, absolutely. Well, I suppose it also depends on how well the race went.
Yes.
So sometimes you're really not in the mood to sit and dissect something that just went horribly wrong. But in general, absolutely. I mean, the guys will spend time with each other and look at what could they have done better. And I'm sure, I mean, part of it earlier, there was obviously the incident that Nicholas had, Manuel, with that Porsche. And I think that's part of it, and that's something that I've seen is that's what kind of distinguishes the good drivers from the champions. If you look at the likes of Tariq, Luke, and Cody, um, what sets them apart is the ability to just keep their nose out of trouble. And that means being super aware of what's happening, making that split second decision, and ensuring that they just keep the car on track and keeping the kind of pace that they can extract from that car. So, I mean, that's where they keep, obviously coaching the guys on, or they continue coaching the guys on. Is how do you best manage your time on the track, and manage other cars, because at some point, especially in enduros, you're going to be going through a lot of back markers, you're going to be going through a lot of traffic, and the important thing is maintaining that pace while working your way through that traffic. So it's extremely important to make sure that you do it safely, and without the right kind of coaching or experience, you'll end up in a world of trouble and a world of hurt, and with these fine margins between all the drivers that's on track. I mean, an incident can end up pushing you out of top 10 quite easily.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, I mean, Gareth, there's a lot of infrastructure, like you say, with regards to the digital marketing side and the cybersecurity. Of course, cybersecurity is a big topic that everyone seems to be talking about, with the amount of virtual private networks and other sort of methods and stuff like that. How analytical is the team when, like, say, as Paul was just saying about the debrief post a race? How in depth can the conversations be between the drivers when they go like, yeah, well, this has been happening. Yeah, I'm not quite happy with this. Of course, earlier on in the season, we saw Luke having a double puncture at Spa when the track had evolved to the point where the car, the circuit was completely bone dry, and then we find out that they miss out on the win. Are they? There's always constructive criticism or feedback rather than people getting at loggerheads and going, yeah, well, you know what, you mucked this up because you did this wrong. It's always about complementing each other, isn't it, as part of a team? And that's the Kaizen way.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And like I said, the guys, they also do, particularly Luke. I mean, it's part of what they do is provide training. So not necessarily just to the esports team, but it's actually part of what they do is offer training to anyone who's looking for training. So the most important thing is also understanding the drivers and their driving styles, and I think that's Tariq being the team principal. That's something that he's got to always trying to have a look at, is how do we match up the various drivers for the various events. And it comes down to car choices. It comes down to the setups of the cars, and the guys really getting comfortable with those setups, because you've got 3 guys in a car, so all of them have to be comfortable with the setup. There's some stuff that you can do dynamically, so while on the track you can change your traction control, your engine mapping, and those types of things, but there's some fundamental stuff that on the car that you obviously can't change unless you go back to pits. So all of them need to feel comfortable with that setup. And they spend a lot of time putting those setups together, and the setups are a bit different for each driver, and literally just it comes down to their driving styles, and understanding the other drivers and what suits them. So from that perspective, and in fact, the setups that are shared, that is the strategy, right? Is that setup for that race and for that car and for that series. So whether it be a wet race, recently and even during this week and this Wednesday's Kaizen Championship, it was a wet race, and Tariq really nailed it, right? He was right out front, and he kind of just it was miles ahead. And then come the Thursday night LFM race, it was dry. So now the guys had to very quickly try and adapt to a dry race where they were doing wet race and wet setups basically the entire week. So it's and I think that's also what really makes it interesting is, and as you mentioned earlier, around the having that real time telemetry and being able to share that with the viewers, and being able to communicate it to the drivers, and discussing things around what each other team's pit stop strategies were or are, when they've pitted, what is the average kind of lap time of the current driver in the car. And that's what I really enjoy about endurance racing, is the fact that you can the amount of telemetry that you have available to you, and each driver that gets in the car, he's obviously got a different pace that he's able to maintain, and with the other teams, you're literally sitting and hoping that a slower driver is going to get in the car for the next stint, and as soon as you see someone that's had previous stints that have been right up there in terms of maintaining pace, then you've got to sharpen your pencil a bit. But yeah, that type of telemetry is gold, and I think the technicality in the setups is what really makes it interesting, because you might have two drivers or two teams in the same car, but the setups of those cars are probably vastly different and suited for those drivers.
All right, that's really really interesting. It's good to get the insight into to how this all works. I mean, when we got told that you were our guest this week, Gareth, I believe the words from Luke, who's currently in the car, was something along the lines of, "You are the king of Genisus Esports and the brains behind the operation." How much of that is true?
Well, I don't know. I'd say I might be the purse string, but I think the brains behind the operation is actually Tariq.
Right.
I think he's really put in a lot of effort to bring a lot of the stuff that we're seeing today together, including the Kaizen Championship, and over the time that he's been racing. So, and going back, I mean, it's between Tariq, Luke, and obviously Cody being Jordan's brother. I mean, they share a household, but Jordan kind of took the Luke and Tariq under his wing some time ago, and they spent a hell of a lot of time perfecting the craft. So everything that we currently see, and what we've the progress that we've made, I mean, that really goes down to Tariq and the team. I mean, each one of them have played a vital role. So between Luke, Cody, even the likes of Gio, Christian, Daniel, the other Christian. So it's the guys have really pulled together, and it's not a one-man job. And I think that's true for any success. Is it's never one individual. One person might land up being the spokesperson and the face of the story, but it's truly a team effort. There's no ways we would have been able to achieve this if we didn't have the team that's out there now doing what they're doing.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's not about individuals. There's no I in team, as the going says.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, with everything that's gone on and so far, what is the plan with the future? You want to get your kids involved and get them sim racing as part of the team, or are you keeping them far away from it, or what's next? What's the vision?
Well, I'm trying my best to get the kids into rig, but they haven't really bitten as much as I'd hoped. We even went and got a go-kart. That's at least a starting point. In fact, that's also where Cody started his trade. In fact, I think Jordan as well. But I mean, Cody's got a long-standing history, and he's got a couple of championships under the belt in the go-kart. And even part of the Sim to Real, we were looking at doing an initiative where we do a simulated series in kart racing, and then also give the kids an opportunity. I think ultimately what we would like to do is provide an opportunity in any, from karting through to GT3 and everything in between, to actually go through a simulated series and then get into a real thing. But the next port of call is, we're kind of looking at opening well, I wouldn't say a full-on arena or experience center, but just get a couple of rigs up where school kids can come in and start getting into it and get familiar with it and get comfortable with sim racing, because the barrier to entry is a little bit higher than what your normal console would be. Consoles in general aren't exactly the cheapest item out there. And if you start adding the wheel to that, and you add a rig to that, the barrier to entry is obviously very different for each individual, depending on what level they want to go to and what kind of caliber of gear they'd want to invest in. But I think ultimately it's just giving anyone an opportunity to be able to get into a sim rig in some shape or form and give it a crack. And in fact, I was telling my son earlier, just before I hopped onto the podcast, I said, if we land up getting a couple of rigs going down here in George in the Western Cape, which is where I am at the moment, he's got to get some of his friends from school into there and start racing each other. He must drag them in and get them involved. So we'll see where that goes, but there's definitely an appetite, and like I said, there's a huge uptake in sim racing, and if we can get the younger generation and the kids into it, then all the better. We might have some safer drivers on the road too.
Yeah, I guess is it unusual? Is yours an unusual blueprint where you've combined the esports team with a company? Or would you like to see others take a similar approach to what you've done, rather than just get sponsored by these teams?
No, well, absolutely, and I think if you look at the Kaizen Championship, the two main kind of vendors that we support and we supply their products of is Sentinel One. And Sentinel One is already quite heavily invested in Formula One within the Aston team. And then you've also got Immersive Labs. So you might not have seen it, but if you look at the McLaren car on the front wing, you'll see Immersive written on the front. And Immersive Labs is they focus on cybersecurity awareness and training, which again and it's a gamified platform. Which is quite unique in comparison to anything else that's available on the market. So it's getting these cybersecurity vendors also more invested into the sim racing world as opposed to just the real racing. And there's been some good conversations there, and we'll probably progress with those as the quarters and the year goes on. Come 2024, I was about to say 2014, but we're way past that. Come 2024. But yeah, so I mean, it's and even corporates. There's once this starts developing and gaining more interest, we might be in a scenario where we've got a corporate league and corporate championships. In fact, there is already. If you look at locally, we've got MTN that's also quite heavily invested in F1 schools and that type of thing, including some of the initiatives within ACC. So the more these, and it's a great platform just to get exposure. One, and secondly, to contribute back to the community. So it's not just the good old KFC, kind of cricket leagues that I used to be involved in. I don't know if that was a global thing, but when I grew up, KFC used to sponsor the mini cricket, and Baker's Biscuits used to also be involved. Baker's mini cricket. But we'll probably see more and more of that happening within the esports space, because it's almost every household now has got a some kind of a computer in it, and kids have got access to games that they can go and compete in. So I mean, Fortnite obviously being one of those that also took off quite well in terms of global tournaments and championships. So yeah, it's across the board. It's not also just restricted to the racing.
No, you're right. I mean, I don't have any kids, but my nieces absolutely love Roblox. They're absolutely obsessed with it, and they go online and they compete with other kids across. But they also compete with themselves. They'll sit there in a room playing Roblox together. Like it brings them all together. And I mean, we've talked about this time and time again on previous podcasts. I sometimes feel like sim racing. Sometimes there's a bit of a snobbery towards consoles. But I think a lot of people forget that's how a lot of people get started, and and that's how you got started in this whole thing. And without you getting Gran Turismo, there might never been a Genisus Esports team.
No, absolutely, and I mean, talking about Roblox, I was quite surprised. I took the kids out last night to go and watch a movie. I mean, I never used to enjoy Roblox. They always wanted me to come and join them, and I never saw the point of it. And also, they didn't have invert mouse back then. I'm unfortunately one of those. I learned how to use a mouse playing Descent many moons ago, which means I ended up with an invert mouse, and Roblox didn't have it. So I was like, no ways, that's just confusing me too much. But the interesting thing is there was actually a local bank, Netbank, was advertising a game or a platform that they've got to create it in Roadblocks, which teaches the kids how to manage a job and finances. And I was actually quite surprised. I mean, and this I only saw yesterday, and they're advertising it in the movie house, which was quite strange. But it just shows how much we've evolved with these various platforms. I mean, Minecraft also being one of those that, it's there's such a learning curve there in terms of development skills, even like programming skills, being able to do, making certain objects switch in certain ways or behave in certain ways. It's just phenomenal how through that mechanism that the kids are actually learning real world applications of programming within a game, so to speak. So no, it's phenomenal what contribution technology has actually had on the educational side of things for kids. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, you're right. It gives them a great platform, doesn't it, to learn those skills and potentially earn a living from those skills that they learn, right? As during their youth, and potentially turning it into a career, especially as systems and everything else that we do, we become so reliant on technology and it's all online. And I guess that's why you have a company that does cyber security, right? It doesn't go like a week that we don't find out there's been some hack somewhere and data's been exploited, and and suddenly you can go on to have I been pawned, and you'll find that your email address has been, is on there and so forth. So yeah, very, very true. Stepping away from your esports team and just kind of taking a wider view at sim racing and esports, is there anything that sim racing doesn't do now that you would like to see in 4 to 5 years' time?
Sure, that's an interesting question. Well, I think it's just a case of trying to bring it as close to real world scenarios as possible. So I suppose the trajectory that we're on just needs to continue. I wouldn't necessarily say that there's anything in particular that we'd want to see that we're not seeing. Because the maturity within this space is phenomenal. So I would just say that we're quite excited to see what is going to come out. I think and also in the space of AI, that's obviously a huge topic, and I think I just saw something now recently that is now the word of the year, according to, I think it was Oxford, the Oxford Dictionary, because that's the most used word or phrase over the last year. So I suppose adopting a lot more AI, because if you think of the current AI capabilities within the game, it's very static, I suppose. So if we could get a lot more realistic kind of competitive single player driving, I think that'll be an interesting evolution. But outside of that, I mean, I suppose it's just continue as usual, business as usual. Just making sure that we continue working towards bringing the two worlds together to a point that we wouldn't be able to distinguish between virtual and real.
Interesting. You just made me think of a question. There was some YouTubers, I think, in the last couple of weeks have put out some videos about pedals and about the manipulation you could do on the throttle and the brake, and kind of question, is that a bit of an unfair advantage, especially when you come to esports? What's your view on things like that?
Well, I suppose when you get to the highest level, I mean, if you look at Formula One, there's a cap on the amount of spend that you can have. So at some point, there'll need to be some sort of consistency across all of the hardware that's being used and the systems that are being used. In these types of tournaments, I mean, each individual is obviously left to his own devices, figuratively and literally, in terms of the hardware that they use. So whether it's an unfair advantage, who knows? Obviously, if you look at the entry level type of pedals that you get as opposed to load cell pedals, there's a big difference in terms of the feel and the accuracy in terms of the braking and coming into the braking zone. But is it a benefit? I've actually seen some of the guys at the top level in SRO racing with their G29s, which is a really the most entry level kind of force feedback wheel that you can get from Logitech. And you've got others that are running the Simu Cubes and the Fanatec's and the like, and the Moses, which obviously are premium brands. And there's pros and cons. Just listening to some of the guys speaking, I think the higher level gear, gives you much more granular feeling on what's happening. But on the other hand, sometimes some of that feeling actually lands up causing more of an issue for some of the drivers than not having that feeling. I've heard some commentary on some of the streamers around the G29 type of class wheel that if you're hitting certain curbs, it's not going to react the same way that some of the higher end wheels will. So you benefit from not having to fight against that, and you're actually unaware that you've actually gone through something that otherwise might have caused issues. So there's pros and cons, I suppose, but when you get to the highest level, there obviously needs to be some kind of consistency in the hardware that's being used, just to even the playing field, I suppose. But I've even seen some interesting stuff around active pedals now recently.
Yes.
And how beneficial is that? Who knows? It gives you a more realistic feeling again, having that vibration on the feet. But maybe you can just shove a bass speaker next to it and set it up a bit. Who knows? That'll also give you a bit of a feeling. But yeah, so I mean, it's you obviously want to have consistency in the hardware.
Yeah, I think on the force feedback piece, for me personally, I was doing a Zuka wet race and my force feedback stopped working, and I set the fastest lap of the race and got P1. Like sometimes not having that fighting against the wheel, as you say, can sometimes up your level of performance. So yeah, is it an advantage? That's a really good question to ask. Okay, Gareth, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you. Thank you very much for joining us. Our hour is up. Thank you for giving up some of your day to speak with us today. Hopefully your lights come back on soon. If people want to follow you, they can find you on Twitter, Genisus_Esports. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the Esports team, or else they can just go to genisisextreme.com. One word, and all the details are there to follow the team, to join the community. On the risk side, it's pretty straightforward, genisisrisk.com. They can just go and follow the team and all the various things that we're doing in both the security side and the esports side.
Well, yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, Gareth. It's been an absolute pleasure learning more about the team and kind of ethos behind it and everything that goes on behind the scenes. But yeah, thank you very much. And for those of you watching the stream, that was Gareth Hawkins from Genisus Esports telling us all about the setup there. And we'll be right back with the race at the Moser Endurance Championship right after these adverts. See you then.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.